even my first Olympics where I got sidelined with the injury and then I had this come back and make the Olympics. That is an obstacle I had to overcome. And I talk about the power of kind of going all in before the results, before the momentum, before we can guarantee the result. And that's what that was for me. Like I was all in on this thing, even though I had no reason to believe I was going to qualify. And so I talk about the mindset and consistency it takes to achieve something incredible when we don't have all the pieces in play yet. We don't have all the certainty we want. And that's okay. And we can still achieve really wonderful things when we choose to show up and go all in.
Welcome to Engage Presents. I'm Engage co-founder and president Jake Olson. In this interview series, I ask Engage talent the most common questions we hear from event planners to help you get to know them and their stories in 15 minutes or less. Thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode of Engage Presents. I'm Engage president Jake Olson. Alongside me today, a very fascinating, successful competitor, Sarah Wells. She is an Olympic hurler, an excellent architect, and a leadership researcher. Sarah, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What got you into it first? Was it running or jumping? And then at what point did you kind of realize, hey, like I'm really good at this. I can compete at an Olympic level?
So I was not the athlete who was like, oh, she's definitely going to make the Olympics one day. I never really got involved in competitive sport when I was younger. Came from kind of a family that didn't have a lot of resources. My parents had four kids. And so, if they couldn't put us all in sports, none of us were getting put in sports. And so I didn't do anything until high school. I was in gym class one day, and my high school teacher saw me in gym class and was like, you just accelerated, dead stopped at that ball, and accelerated away again. I want to teach you how to hurdle. And I was like, I had already been cut at like every single team at that school. Like, I was like, I'm pretty sure you don't want me. Like, I am actually really garbage at sports. And he's like, no, 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 I think you could be good. And so that high school teacher took me under his wing and started to train and develop me. And within a year and a half, we were on a plane traveling to Marrakesh, Morocco to compete at the World Youth Championships
Wow.
and on the international stage for the very first time. And that high school teacher and I stayed coach and athlete until we made the Olympics together 9 years later.
That's awesome. And just for, I'm sure people can look this up, but just for ease,
Mhm.
talk about just that real quickly. Just, what Olympics was it? How was it being there? Um,
Yeah.
what it felt like, et cetera.
Yeah, so I competed at the London Olympics in 2012. It was so surreal. You train, a decade, sometimes 2 decades for this moment, and the energy in the stadium was electrifying. Like 80,000 people just like screaming at a decibel like I've never heard that. Normally at track meets it's like everyone's moms and that's
Yeah.
it. Like that's it. And so to have 80,000 people just like, wow, like was just so cool. And, in my keynotes, I talk about being injured. I stress fractured my femur and had this epic comeback and then made the Olympics when I like, shouldn't have, using air quotes, ever made it. And so to make it there at all was already surreal. And then I actually ended up qualifying for the semifinals. And there's this really epic photo I have of after I was like, I finished my qualifying rounds. I'm now like waiting for them to put like name by name of like who's gone through to the next round because other qualifying rounds could have faster time. So you kind of don't know where you've mapped out. And so I'm like watching and waiting for my name. So it's like tick, 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 this person, like tick, 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 this person. And then it's like Sarah Wells tick, 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 qualified. And I'm just like elated, like, oh my gosh. And there was a group of just like red people that like stand up in like the top of the bowl that are just like, ah. And so I was like, oh, I must know those people. And so I point to them and I just acknowledge, like, we did it, whoever you are. And a photographer caught that photo.
Hmm.
And that ended up being exactly where my family was sitting. And I had no idea that that's exactly where they were. And so just such a cool moment to have on captured of like, because everyone's a part of that journey.
Yeah.
Everyone's a part of that experience. And so to get to sharing that together was pretty surreal.
Well, and so you mentioned it, and let's kind of get into it. Talked about a little bit of one of your setbacks you faced, but in your keynotes, you address kind of how you make setbacks turn into opportunities. Can you kind of talk through what that looks like?
Yeah. So honestly, it actually has less to do with even my first Olympics where I got sidelined with the injury and then I had this come back and make the Olympics. That is an obstacle I had to overcome. And I talk about the power of kind of going all in before the results, before the momentum, before we can guarantee the result. And that's what that was for me. Like I was all in on this thing, even though I had no reason to believe I was going to qualify. And so I talk about the mindset and consistency it takes to achieve something incredible when we don't have all the pieces in play yet. We don't have all the certainty we want. And that's okay. And we can still achieve really wonderful things when we choose to show up and go all in. But more about turning kind of obstacles and some of those setbacks into opportunities comes from my second Olympic experience where I was now a medal hopeful and I ended up because 4 years later, I'd been getting faster and better and was a medal hopeful. And I ended up tearing my hamstring right before the
Mm.
Rio Olympics. And I went from being like Sarah Wells, the Olympian for 4 years. Like, I'd just come off winning a silver medal where I only lost to the number one ranked woman in the world. It was like all set up, everything was ready to go. And I tear my hamstring. And then I end up getting fourth at Olympic trials for Rio and not going. And I talk about how, like, what I learned through that experience is that like hard work doesn't always lead to success because I believed in myself. I did all the right stuff. I went all in. Like I did it. And I was like, it didn't work out the way I had hoped to. And so was this, going all in, believing in yourself, is that all a sick joke that makes you feel better? And I realized I actually believed in myself more strongly after not making the Olympics, even more so than when I did, because I still stood on the start line that day and I didn't let my circumstances define my outcome. I went for it anyways. And it didn't work out the way I'd hoped, but it showed me a strength inside I didn't even know that I had. And that's something I can carry forward and use towards the next opportunity. And I think so many of us have experiences like that where, we pour everything into it. We do all the right stuff. We get back up. We persevere. We ask for help. We do everything right. And it just doesn't work out. But that doesn't make it a waste of time. That doesn't make it an epic failure because you can always pick those lessons up and apply it to your next opportunity. And so it takes some understanding of that excellence isn't just about the outcome, it's who we become in pursuit of those goals. And so recognizing those things that we picked up along the way as the actual value of that journey. And so for me, certainly the Rio Games taught me that.
Yeah, what an amazing lesson. And you mentioned it there, failure. I mean, after something like that, some people once failing or, not accomplishing what they set out to accomplish in the way they wanted to, start to fear that failure, either post or even pre. How do you encourage teams to kind of experiment and take those risks despite there being that fear of failure?
Yeah, I think what it largely takes is a culture of experimentation, a willingness to recognize that we sometimes only get to learn that expertise, that knowledge through the pursuit. And so we can't guarantee that it's always going to go to plan. And so it takes, everyone committing and being comfortable with and accepting and encouraging that pursuit of like the only thing we care about is what are we going to learn? What are we going to
Mm.
develop? How are we going to build relationships? What are we going to take away from here? And when you have that kind of mindset, that allows you to start to actually build that momentum. In my sport, it's like you had to find where the line was, And so you wanted to run as fast as you could without burning out that you like don't cross the finish line or you hit hurdle 10 and you don't make it,
Yeah.
And so we would experiment all the time with, well, what if you ran a second faster through the first half of the race? Does that blow you up in the second half? And then if we did blow up and it did the race, we couldn't finish or we didn't finish well, okay, well then let's dial it back, half a second from there. And let's see, does that actually push it? It's like, oh no, I actually had way too much in the tank by the end. Okay, well then we got to give a little bit more. And so you have to find that line. And that's going to come through experimentation. That's going to come through being comfortable with like, yeah, sometimes you're not going to make it to the finish line or you're going to have the race not go to plan, but you only learn that through the experimentation.
I love that the idea that you head into something it's not necessarily about the end goal, but we're committed to just learning through this experience. I love that. So let's talk about people who are sustaining success and those who kind of don't. What's the difference there between a team or a person who is able to sustain and not?
Well, I think that it's a little bit the mindset of recognizing it is more than one singular moment. Because if you pour everything into just a singular project, a singular quarter, a singular year, it can be quite defeating when that's over and you either got it or you didn't, and you're like, okay, well, here's the end of the path. And that's why, some athletes deal with you make the Olympics, everything has been around that, and then they fall off the edge of the cliff. Like they don't know who they are, they don't know where to go next. And I think everyone has a flavor of that. But I was really fortunate to recognize that like sport was a chapter in my entire life. And I think that led me into speaking because it was, after not making the Olympics in Rio, I thought like, oh my God, no one wants to hear how to lose. Like, hey, here's how you get fourth. Yeah, isn't that great? Don't you want to learn how to do that? And I was like, no one's going to want to hear that. But when I shared that story, it was the story that stuck with people. It was the thing that was the human experience, the thing that people connected to the most. And so um, suddenly I realized that like my Olympic journey in that sport could be repackaged, repurposed, and it brought some momentum to my speaking career. And so I think you sustain excellence when you stop looking at things as like isolated containers and recognize that they are all connected and they all actually build on each other. And even in a moment where things don't go to plan or don't go in defined as excellence as someone might assume, we recognize that it's like, but this isn't the end of the road. So who's not to say that when that didn't work out, that's actually leading us to our excellence opportunity down the
Yeah.
line.
Kind of talk us through your keynotes. I hear you have some fun add-ons. You do customize your sessions in different ways. Just talk about kind of what the actual session looks like, what it's like to work with you, and kind of how you add those fun add-ons on.
Yeah, so as hopefully anyone can already tell, it's like every piece of feedback I get is like, we love your energy. Oh my God, we love your
Yeah.
energy. It's like opening a conference with like a bang and setting the tone. I love, and then closing the conference to make sure that we like go out with the hope, the inspiration, the
Yes.
momentum. I love bringing the energy. And so that's definitely one thing you can almost guarantee to have as part of our event if we work together. And then the storytelling and the messaging, I love hate that I have Olympic athletes sometimes because I think people recognize Olympian and then they're like, oh, okay, they're just going to be like, all right, come to the top of the mountain with me. Aren't I amazing? Thanks so much. Bye. And that's just not the kind of keynote speaker I am. I am not what can be like a typical Olympic keynote speaker. I spend a lot of time treating speaking like my new sport, where I have a storytelling coach, I have a humor coach, I have what's called staging and blocking momentum, like movement on the stage, because I'm making sure that my message isn't just a great story. It's how does that tie back to you? How do I keep you entertained and engaged? How do I make sure my movements on stage help carry the narrative in a way that you're subconsciously not even understanding that that's on purpose? And so, if I'm going to talk about excellence, I better dang well be excellent. And so, that level of detail and care is brought to the event, and that comes through in the customizations, that comes through in which stories we're choosing to tell. And I always try to make sure I communicate with the client to like tie in like real examples, like real language and jargon specific to what the audience will be facing. So there's that. And then the bells and whistles and kind of cherries on top is, sometimes I offer a run with an Olympian as part of the event where if you're going to be sitting at a conference all day, sometimes it's fun to say like, hey, meet Sarah at 6:30 a.m. but before the conference starts, and we're going to do like a 3 mile run for fun. And sometimes it's like a walk run, depending on like who shows up and who wants to get involved. But it's just a great way to get the audience or the people, attendees engaged and involved ahead of time and a different form of connection with them. And then I make sure that each of my key messaging the audience has an actual action and takeaway that they will change, that they will do differently based on each one of my elements of excellence, which we decide on collaboratively through the client call and figuring out what will best serve the audience. So, yeah, it's I love what I do, and hopefully everyone can feel that from the get-go. But I genuinely take this with my like whole heart and commitment because I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to get to make this impact and create so much meaning and purpose from my Olympic experience that at one point was like, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened. And now it's like, this is the best thing that ever happened. And so, yeah, love to do this work and really grateful for the opportunities.
Only an Olympian would say a 3 mile fun is fun. So a little fun run there, 3 mile fun run.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for just giving us a glimpse into who you are and what you speak about. You're right. Your energy comes through, inspiration comes through. So we appreciate that. If you want to learn more about Sarah, please go to lessengaged.com. You can check out her profile there, obviously book her. And Sarah, we continue to wish you success and thank you for allowing us to, be able to put your message out there because it really is motivating, and I'm sure it changes teams
Well,
and lives.
thank you so much. It's a delight to work with you guys and your clients. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for more Engage Presents.